Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Markquart. I am a staff attorney at Innocence Project of Minnesota. And today we're going to talk with one of our clients who's recently returned home from a long stint at prison after being wrongfully convicted, Ronnie Cooper, who's here with us. We have a few other members of the team joining today. Oleg Shik is an associate at law firm Paul Weiss in New York, which is my former law firm. That worked on this case. We also have Renée Paradis, who was Ronnie's appellate attorney and brought this case to Paul Weiss. She's now working as an attorney at the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. And we also have one of our investigators, Clancy Nolan, who works at Mintz Group, joining us today. So before we get into some questions with Ronnie, I just want to give a little bit of background on the case for everyone. So Ronnie was convicted in 2010 on multiple counts in federal court in Tennessee based on allegations that he had participated in a drug trafficking ring, which was not true. Ronnie was tried alongside several other co-defendants as to whom there was stronger evidence of guilt. And the dynamic that came into play here that we see often is juries really have a hard time disentangling group guilt from individual guilt when you have these types of joint trials. And in this case, the evidence against Ronnie as an individual was really remarkably thin, but he was convicted. That evidence relied in large part on two jailhouse informants, both of whom were seeking leniency in their own cases, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But Ronnie was convicted despite the weak evidence, and the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals ended up affirming his conviction, notwithstanding the exceptional advocacy of Renee. And Renee, I just want to ask you a question quick. You brought this case to Paul Weiss back in 2014, shortly after Ronnie's direct appeal. And I remember, you presented his case from the beginning as being a case of actual innocence, and you were very passionate about that. And we'll get to some of the facts that we developed through the subsequent investigation. But what was it back in 2014 that led you to have such a strong conviction even then that Ronnie was innocent and had been wrongfully convicted?
I've been thinking about this question, and I guess what I would say, it was a combination of, so when I got this case, Ronnie, and I believe maybe his family reached out to me even in advance of me getting any of the trial record, and were like, I didn't do it, and you have to get me out on appeal. And I hear that from a lot of my clients. And so what I said to him is like, look, I don't have the stuff yet, and whether or not you're innocent generally doesn't matter on appeal, and it's a very narrow set of arguments we're dealing with. All the things I ordinarily say to clients. And then I got the record and I read through it, and, I don't know, I'm a mystery buff. I watch The Wire. I actually understand how drug conspiracies work. And it was so evident to me that he wasn't involved, that you had, Jamie Rush talking about everything and everybody, implicating every single other person except Ronnie. Ronnie, meanwhile, is working at a gas station, not something that drug kingpins ordinarily do. And the two people who, supposedly implicated him are these jailhouse informants, who are just absolutely the least trustworthy folks, because they're not people who have been in the conspiracy and then turned, like Jamie Rush. It is literally people who are just completely unconnected to the conspiracy at hand. So it was just really self-evident looking at the evidence that there was nothing there. And I've definitely, seen a lot of cases where people get charged with really slim evidence. And I think the idea here is Ronnie had a family connection and they wanted him to plead guilty and to testify against the conspiracy. And they were, the government was willing to punish him for not doing that by imprisoning him for 30 years.
Yeah. Thanks, Renee. So Oleg's gonna run us quick through some of the investigation and litigation leading up to Ronnie being freed.
Great, thanks, Andrew. So once my firm Paul Weiss took on the case, we worked with a team of investigators led by Clancy at the Mintz Group to interview witnesses and investigate the case in the hope of proving Ronnie's innocence. And our big break actually came with when Clancy and another investigator, Lois Colley, were able to track down the government's star witness, Jamie Rush. Rush was the #2 man in this drug ring, and once he was arrested, he agreed to cooperate with the government and testify at trial. Rush had extensive knowledge of the drug ring and testified over the course of 3 days about all of Ronnie's co-defendants, but importantly, Rush never implicated Ronnie himself. So my question to Clancy is, in about October 2015, you and Lois tracked down Jamie Rush and convinced him to meet you at a Buffalo Wild Wings to talk about, what he knew about Ronnie and his case. What did you learn from Rush during this conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Oleg. Lois and I we got Jamie Rush on the phone before we went down to South Carolina, and he indicated that if we came down, he would sit down and talk with us. So we showed up in Columbia and gave him a call and left him a voicemail and did not get him. And so we spent a good day kind of waiting, stopping by his house, leaving him another voicemail, talking to his neighbors. And we were a little worried that Jamie wasn't actually that he was kind of rethinking whether or not he was gonna talk to us. But that evening, he gave me a call and said, I am at the Buffalo Wild Wings. If you come over, here, we'll talk to you. I'll talk to you. And so we met him out front, and he was actually, we were worried that he was rather inconvenienced by us, but he was actually really nice. And we went and sat down in a booth and said again who we were, that we were working on behalf of Ronnie's attorneys. And he said immediately Ronnie was not involved in the Cinematics conspiracy. And so we asked him the kind of key question that we had, which was, what did the government ask you and what did you tell them? And he said that the government was interested in Ronnie, throughout, and that he had been interviewed numerous times. And he told them that Ronnie was not involved, and that the reason, and that the government knew Ronnie wasn't involved, and that's why no one asked him any questions about Ronnie at trial. So we very quickly reported that to Andrew.
Thanks, Clancy. And so as you mentioned, the government never provided that information to Ronnie or his defense counsel. And this exact failure became the basis of our habeas motion to vacate Ronnie's conviction. Our motion was based on a very famous case called Brady versus Maryland, which was decided by the Supreme Court in 1963. In Brady, the court held that the prosecution has a constitutional obligation to turn over exculpatory evidence before trial. That is, the government must disclose to a defendant any evidence that makes it less likely that the defendant is guilty. And based on what Jamie Rush told our investigators, we filed our motion in November 2015, arguing that the government violated this constitutional duty by failing to disclose Rush's pretrial statements. In March of 2019, the court finally issued a decision finding that the facts alleged in support of Ronnie's Brady motion, if proven, would be sufficient to support a Brady claim. And the court therefore found that Ronnie was entitled to an evidentiary hearing where he would have the opportunity to prove those facts. The court held that evidentiary hearing in August of 2019, and Jamie Rush, who testified, provided testimony that supported Ronnie's Brady claim. In the meantime, our investigators kept working and were able to locate and interview both of the Jailhouse informants who testified against Ronnie at trial. Both of the informants recanted their testimony and submitted sworn affidavits saying they lied on the stand in the hope of receiving reduced sentences in their own criminal cases. The combination of Jamie Rush's favorable testimony and the sworn recantations from both informants left the government's case against Ronnie completely in shambles. So the government finally agreed to have the court resentence Ronnie to time served and Ronnie got his freedom on May 18th, 2020, nearly 20 years before his sentence was initially set to expire. So we have a few questions for you, Ronnie. Ronnie, first, how does it feel to be home after all these years?
Oh man, it's wonderful, amazing. I can't explain the feelings. It's just amazing to be home. Wonderful.
And, you know, going back to 2010, you were arrested and charged with crimes that you know you had not committed.
Yeah.
What were you thinking at that time that you were charged?
I was thinking that it couldn't be real because I knew I wasn't involved in it. I didn't believe it. I thought it was fake for real. I thought it was fake. I didn't, you know, I thought it's just a mix-up with another Ronnie Cooper. Like, I didn't believe it was me. Like, I thought when I got to court, they would just be like, oh, this the wrong guy. And then, you know, I'll be let go. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Did you have hope that, you know, eventually the truth would win out through the trial process?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I really, you know, that's all I had, really. You know, it wasn't like I had money for a paid lawyer that would guarantee my freedom. So all I had was the truth. I thought I would just get a fair shake and try at court and trial. You know.
So we now know that some of the key testimony against you at trial was perjured, was false. How did it, what was your experience of sitting there listening to witnesses give that testimony that you knew was a lie?
I'm glad you asked that because the whole time I kept tapping my lawyer and I kept telling him, like, this guy's lying. I don't know this guy. And he kept telling me to be quiet because he needed to hear what he was saying. But I kept telling, I was going crazy because he's lying. I know he's lying. And I'm telling my lawyer, you know, because I've never been to trial before, you know. So it was a new experience. And to hear that and see that, it was just like, you got to do something about this. Come on. He's lying. But, you know, I don't know. It just got scary. So, yeah.
Ronnie, even setting aside the fact of your innocence, I think many viewers would be shocked by the length of your sentence. You got 30 years for charges related to alleged drug trafficking.
Right.
In most Western countries, such a lengthy sentence would be reserved for crimes like murder.
Right.
Here in this country, such punitive sentences are often imposed for non-violent drug crimes.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind when that sentence came down and you were looking at spending such a huge chunk of your life behind bars?
I was, man, because my trial lawyer, he told me that, it'll be 10 years. So when I got the report back and it said 30 years, I thought this was, again, I thought this was fake. I thought, this can't be real. There's no way this could be real. For drugs? I'm like, come on. You know, because when he told me 10 years, I always, in my head, I said, all right, I'm gonna have to pill this and but in 30 years, it was like, I was going mad. I was like, you gotta do something about this. Like, you really gotta, you know, and then he couldn't do anything about it. And he got sentenced, and right before the sentencing, I kind of wrote the judge, but you know, the judge, he doesn't write you back. So I kind of duplicated the letter, and I had it for sentencing. And in the letter, it was to fire my lawyer, my trial lawyer, because I knew that he didn't have my best interest at hand. I knew that it was certain things that he was supposed to do at trial that he didn't. It was questions that he was supposed to ask. he didn't help me. So, that whole experience was scary. It was the darkest thing I ever really kind of been through in my life.
Yeah, that's understandable. So as we mentioned, your conviction was largely on the testimony of two jailhouse informants,
Mm-hmm.
both of whom later admitted that they were lying in the hopes of getting better deals in their own cases. We know that jailhouse informant testimony is often unreliable since people facing their own criminal cases may have an incentive to lie.
Right.
They can get favorable treatment in return. It's also well documented that the testimony of jailhouse informants has played a role in many wrongful convictions.
Right.
So having spent time in jail and prison, can you speak about the pressures inmates feel to invent testimony against others?
Yeah, it happens all the time. I've seen it, I've seen people go back to court to testify on people just to get out of doing their own sentences and things of that nature. But I've seen it up close and personal. Like, I never really, to be honest with you, I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that the government would allow this to go on. Our government, the great government of the United States, I would never thought that these things can happen to, someone. I always, especially the federal government, I always thought it was, once they got you, it's, and you're convicted, and I didn't think they would let people go through lengths to make up lies to imprison somebody. I could never imagine that in my whole life.
And was this practice something you heard discussed or witnessed firsthand, other than your own case?
Okay. Always say like, oh, other people that
Yeah,
that I've ran across.
yeah. Just can you?
Basically, I've seen like inmates. This was one guy. He was charged with selling drugs, and he was supposedly involved in a conspiracy in like Virginia somewhere. And he didn't get caught with any drugs. He didn't testify. It was just friends of his. He just took a picture with a guy, and they brought him into this conspiracy, And I just knew bits and pieces of his case, but he would talk to me about certain little things, and it just was like similar to my case, but in there, and I didn't really want to tell him that much about my case because that's what they do. That's what they do in jail. They jump on your case to lie, and I didn't know where I was at with like my appeals and everything. I didn't know if somebody can still tell on me or lie, and say anything because this is what these guys already got to understand and do. So I didn't talk to him too much about my case. So, but it's been a couple guys, with similar cases.
So Ronnie, it sounds like in your years in prison, you encountered other people who were probably wrongfully convicted as well.
Yes.
Are there, obviously prison is not a fun place for anyone, but are there specific challenges that you found were common to people who've been wrongfully convicted they're different from what any other inmate might experience?
Well, to be honest with you, like it's been a few guys that talk about cases in the law library and things of that nature because that's what I mostly were, and they would express their feelings about their cases and what happened with them and why they were innocent of this crime or that or the other. Yeah.
Okay. You know, Ronnie, one issue that we encounter a lot in post-conviction litigation, and was certainly the case in your cases, is these cases can just drag on for years.
Oh yeah.
And in, you know,
About
in
it.
your case, and I know you're acutely aware of that. You know, in your case, we filed your original motion way back in November 2015. We didn't even get a decision finding that you were going to get an evidentiary hearing until March 2019. So, you know, almost 3.5 years later. And, you know, I think some of our people who might be watching this who aren't lawyers, you know, might be kind of aware of this constitutional guarantee to a speedy trial, but might not realize that that really doesn't apply in the post-conviction
Definitely not.
phase.
There was nothing speedy about this case.
Right, right.
Conviction.
No, certainly. So in reality, you know, there's really pretty limited mechanisms for forcing a court to act on petitions like yours. And unfortunately, you know, when you have someone like you who's innocent, you know, all those years of waiting is, you know, just compounds the injustice. So now I'm wondering, you know, how were you able to maintain hope during such a long period of uncertainty?
Oh man, family, religion, you know. Uh, Man, I just want to say thank you, Renee, again, man. She, I took her through it. I know, like emails back and forth to her, expressing how I felt, and I know I was getting on her nerves, but she would always keep it real with me and, you know, tell me like, you know, oh, you're right in this aspect, but this is what the government's gonna say, and you know, but yeah, she even kind of, you know, kept me, you know, inspired, and you know, because of the help she got from me, you know, and just believing in me. And she believed in me. Like, man, I'm grateful for that. But, you know, family and friends and, you know, just wanting to fight to get back to my family, my children, you know, that just kept me going, you know.
It's awesome.
It's hard though.
It was a long road.
Definitely hard. Definitely hard.
I remember
Definitely.
I remember Ronnie and I would go back and forth these very long emails and calls, and he was
Yes.
very concerned, very frustrated. And then when he got the brief that I filed, he called me up and said, "You know, that's tight. That was tight." And it was the best feedback on a piece of legal writing I've ever gotten. He was like, "I should have believed in you. I should have trusted you. This was fine."
I said, even if we lose, you know, this you put this together, like you know, and she did, you know. You know, I appreciate it. I appreciate you, Renee. I thank you for everything you've done for me.
I'm so glad
Everything,
to
for
see you well.
introducing me to Andrew and his law firm and everything. It was you who started this, you know, because after I fired my trial lawyer, that's all I had was you know, and I expressed to, you know, my feelings to you of how scared I was to not have you after the appeal. And, you know, you kept your word though. And that's what meant everything to me. You kept your word. You told me you wouldn't make me no promises. You couldn't make me any promises. And, you know, but you were going to try to help me as much as you could. And that right there, you know, nobody's ever done that for me in my life, you know. And I just want to thank you for real, you know, for everything you've done, for believing in me, for believing in my case, my innocence, you know. Thank you very much.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
I literally just did my job. And I wish more
Yeah.
people had done their jobs, you know, with
Well,
their
you
life.
did a better job than my trial lawyer, I'll tell you that. Because without you, I'll probably still be stuck in there, be honest. If you never made the move that you did for me, I'll probably be still stuck in there, to be honest with you. You never brought Andrew and them aboard. You know, if Andrew never hired, you know, the investigators that were on the case, you know, I see myself still being in prison if that didn't happen. And I thank all of y'all. But, you know, Renee, thank you so much. my family thinks you as well, even though you're not here. That's all.
Well, we're so glad you're back with them, Ronnie, and I know everybody has meant a lot to all of us to work on your case and to
Yeah.
see you come to such a good ending here. I want to talk about, an issue that's been very prominent in the public discourse, particularly since you've been back out in the world. So I'm based here in Minneapolis now, and just a couple weeks after you were released,
Right.
shockwaves were sent around the country after a really horrific killing of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer here in Minneapolis on May 25th. And in the aftermath of that killing, there's been a real surge of public interest and engagement on issues of racial justice.
Right.
I think it's fair to say is really on a level that we haven't seen in this country in a long time.
Right.
And I think many people are recognizing the degree to which our justice system consistently fails Black people, sometimes with fatal consequences.
Right.
And looking at your case, I've always been struck by the fact that you were convicted and sentenced to 30 years in prison, just based on really thin evidence. And I can't help but wonder whether a tendency for people to see Black men as inherently dangerous and inclined toward crime impacted the jury's thinking in your case, even unconsciously, and made it easier for them to conclude you were guilty, even without compelling evidence. So I guess I'm wondering, just based on your personal experiences, how have you seen the hand of racism at play in our criminal justice system?
I think it's definitely prominent, and it's like the main focus, I would say, probably. But to be honest with you, and sitting there at trial, I really just know that, racism, it like I said, it definitely plays a part, but the jury doesn't know their job, to be honest with you. Because I'll say this, and I'll tell you why I say this, because you guys are lawyers, and you went to school for years to know the law, to understand the law. And these juries are sitting there and they don't know the law like that, So that's why they will revert back to the racism, because it's like, oh, he's Black, he probably did it. So they'll just, instead of trying to go through the law, and trying to just say, we know the law and we'll just go by the law. They don't do that. And just probably just go by, looks and, because they, like that. I think that's, why racism is definitely, there with the jury, as far as the jury is concerned. But the justice system, yeah, definitely, I think they're racist, I think, to be honest.
Yeah, we certainly have a long ways to go.
I think that, it has to change. It should change. I hope they'll have more good lawyers like you guys that'll help change this, maybe, hopefully.
Well, there are a lot of us who really would like to see that change and are fighting for it. So Ronnie, how did you feel when you heard that the government had agreed to resentence you to time served and that you were going to be going home?
Oh man,
yeah, you had to do a little bit you had to wait because of COVID. Of course, you came out in a weird world and had to wait a couple weeks for a COVID quarantine. But how did you feel when you got that news?
Oh man, I didn't think that was real. I said, come on. I said, oh man, I was so happy.
I think you told me you better not be messing with me or something.
Yeah, that's what I said. You better be shitting me. That's what I said. After all that time being in prison like that, lost his family and friends and things of that nature, it's like I went through a hard time. I had a hard, my 10 years was hard, I'm not gonna lie. And then I had another damn 20 years to go. So all of it was hard, and just, when you gave me that news, it was just like a big boulder being lifted, like the world was on my shoulders. So it's like, he can't be serious. He can't. I hope he's not playing. Like, I was so happy, man. I can't even really explain that either. I was so happy, man. That was one of the best feelings in the world.
It's awesome. Yeah. So the last question I had for you, Ronnie, is, now that you've regained your freedom, what are your hopes and aspirations for life going forward? What's next for Ronnie Cooper?
Just to spend time with my family and loved ones, appreciate them more, appreciate life more, appreciate people, period. Just all people, just, because I know that there are some good people out there in the world. Like, it's people that, like I said, I've never had someone help me like this, you know what I'm saying, in my whole entire life. So, it just going forward, just spending time with my family and just, being productive in society and just, working, taking more trips. I want to take a trip. I ain't gonna lie. Take more trips. Because I'm not a big fan of, getting on a plane and going somewhere, like to another country or anything like that. But I might do it once.
Definitely.
So,
Well, hopefully, the world will be back to normal soon, and you can take full
Then
advantage
you told me at dinner
everything.
too. You said we were going to dinner, and
I will eat dinner.
Make sure
All
you
right.
did too, Renee. Make sure you did, and you too, Ms. Nolan. Make sure you did, and you.
We look forward to that day.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to say, Ronnie?
No, I'm good, man. I just want to thank y'all again for, the tremendous work that you have done on this case and for putting everything together, and for hiring those super, super cool investigators, man, because they did their thing out there, in the field. That was amazing when they came back with that news. Man, I just want to thank you all. Thank y'all, because y'all the reason that I'm here right now. And y'all the reason for me being free. No matter how the courts, wind up, letting me out, but it was because of y'all. And I thank y'all very much. I can't even, man, I wish I had $10 million to give each one of you. That's how much it's worth to me, and even more. So I thank you.
Well, thank you, Ronnie. And I know I speak on behalf of everyone on this call and everyone who worked on this. And there were a lot of people, Paul Weiss and elsewhere that put a lot of effort in this. And I know it was our honor to work on your case. We all believe so deeply in you. And it's just been a real thrill and joy to see you back in the world where you belong and to see you thriving. And I know you're gonna do well, because you're a strong person, and we're just so happy for you and excited for what's next for you. So with that, I just want to thank you, Ronnie, for joining us today, and thank everyone else on the call, and wish you best of luck.
All right, thank you. See you later.
Thanks, everybody.
I